There are basically three or four ways we can help users change elevation. We can use elevators or escalators, we can use stairs, and we can use ramps. And the thing about ramps is that they are accessible by people whether they can walk or not, whether they use a wheelchair or not. And there are ADA rules that govern whether or not you need handrails and how steep and how high. So under the code and ADA law, anything that has a slope steeper than 1 in 20 is considered a ramp by law. 1 in 20 is the same as 5%. If you took your calculator and went 1 divided by 20, you would get 0.05, which is 5%. So anyway, steeper than 1 in 20 is a ramp. There are some exceptions that are allowed to the steepness. Well, they're not exceptions. They're just limitations. If you have a ramp that rises no more than 6 inches altogether, you can have a steeper slope from 1 in 10 to 1 in 12. If it rises no more than 3 inches altogether, you can have a steeper slope 1 in 8 to 1 in 10. And slopes steeper than 1 to 8 are not allowed, period. So no matter how long, how high, doesn't matter. If it's steeper than 1 to 8, you can't use it. And if you divide 1 divided by 8, you will find out that that's a 12.5% slope, FYI. ADA guidelines, ADAG, are the ones that give us these details about slopes. They prefer, for accessibility, slopes in the range of 1 to 16 to 1 to 20. And how long a ramp can be depends on what the slope is. Now, the length of the ramp and where the landings are affects people with various kinds of not only wheelchair disabilities, but various kinds of illnesses. So there are some illnesses and chronic conditions where walking is very, very hard work, and walking up a slope is even harder. So ADA limits how long the slope can be based on how steep the slope is. So for example, down at the bottom, if the slope is 10% to 12%, so that's around the 1 in 10, 1 in 12 range, it can't be any longer than 10 feet. If the slope is up to 5%, that's 1 to 20, that ramp can be any distance because that's considered a gradual slope. No matter what, the maximum rise for any run, that is, a run is a ramp in between one flat landing and the next flat landing. So a run cannot rise any more than 30 inches no matter what, no matter how long it is. 30 inches elevation change is the limit. These ramps need to be at least 36 inches wide between railings. Wider is better, but this is the minimum, and that accommodates people using wheelchairs and people pushing strollers and people using walkers. There need to be flat landings, these flat pads, at the top of a ramp and at the bottom of a ramp, and every so many feet of distance. And those landings need to be at least 60 inches long, or 5 feet long. And if you picture, what if you were using a wheelchair, and what if this thing were only 1 foot long? Well, you'd get to the bottom and bloop, you'd fall off the edge or something else bad would happen. So we need a 5-foot space to come to rest and navigate our chair and whatever else we're going to do. There are handrail requirements in the code, and if you're in a commercial setting and you have a ramp that rises more than 6 inches, regardless how long it is or how steep it is, if it rises more than 6 inches, you are required to have a handrail on both sides of the ramp. That is, if it's a ramp, which means it's 1 to 20 or steeper. And the handrails have to be 34 to 38 inches high. Oh, and let me back up. And there are code requirements you're probably aware of about what size and shape handrails have to be and how far away from a wall. So you have to be able to grab these. You can't make a handrail out of a 2 by 10 plank. Back in the 60s, people did that, but you can't do that now. A person has to be able to grab around the rail with their hand. So there we are, there are ramps.